Hello, Steve White, Steve Hearts 89. Well, a little bit more, I guess, insight coming from the situation with Star Trek and what's happening at Paramount with Skydance and Secret Hideout and everything. Where we left off, basically, Skydance was taking over, and they had basically given Kurtzman an ultimatum and a time frame of, you need to show us that you can actually deliver Star Trek, and Star Trek that's recognisable Star Trek, and Star Trek that Star Trek fans want, which is basically legacy. He was basically told, you need to deliver legacy and other legacy-like shows that are going to do the same thing. Use the existing, Star Trek universe that people want and recognise, and give people the adventures, that they used to get with Star Trek. And I think they actually were quite arrogant about that and thought, yeah, we can do that, because they don't really understand Star Trek or creativity or anything. They just think you can just cut and paste and just be like, well, these characters are popular, Seven of Nine's popular, Data's popular, Dax is popular, let's just put them all on the Defiant and we'll just have a new show. It's not that easy. Terry Matalas, developed a show with legacy, and that's what the fans wanted. That's what the actors and creatives involved wanted, and they didn't do that. They decided against that and went other directions instead. And the problem with that, of course, is that it just doesn't work what they're doing. And that's why the IDW comics, the ongoing comics, have just failed, and they've had to relaunch with titles that are closer to the existing series and characters and dynamics that are already developed, because they did the cut and paste thing, where they just threw a bunch of characters from different Star Trek series onto random ships and started telling generic science fiction and contemporary stories, and no one read them, and they failed, and now they have to start again, and they're doing a Voyager story, and they've gone back to miniseries, and they're doing Voyager, and they're doing Strange New Worlds and stuff like that, because just what they tried just didn't work. And that's sort of what Secret Hideouts seem to be thinking they could do. They could just throw anything together, and there's two issues with that. One, it's not going to gel, it's not going to be an actual show. But the other issue is some of the actors, like Jerry Ryan, apparently are not interested, because they want to do legacy, and they want to work with Terry Matalas, and they don't want to just do some knockoff and some cut and paste, just throw characters together. They don't want to do that. So if Jerry, has any integrity, she will say no and wait for Terry Matalas to be available to work on legacy, because he's been snapped up by Disney because they could see he was hot, and that they could steal him from Paramount and stop Paramount from having Star Trek running again and competing with their Star Wars. So they were smart. But he can come back to Star Trek in a few years, and they can come back to legacy in a few years, and they can be a few years into their missions with a different dynamic and all that. That can work. They can come back to it, but in the meantime, I don't think anyone is going to try and sort of do that, God willing, if they have any integrity and taste. So it looks like Bad Robot is not going to be able to get the cast members together to put together the kind of show that they think the studios will be happy with. And if the studios are stupid, they will just take any cut and paste thing, and they'll look at it analytically and go, oh yes, we've got this character and this character from this series. Yes, that'll be popular. That's what fans like. Or if they have a clue, they'll be like, no, you had a show that was developed. You need to do something either like that and as good as that, or you need to actually go forward with that. And they can't do either because they have no talent, and they have no Matalas. So yeah, I don't see it happening. And I mean, the main issue here is Kurtzman himself. He doesn't get Star Trek. He saw Star Trek as a dead brand, and his response to it was just, let's just use the IP and just create a generic science fiction show, and we just do variations and do every type of show under the Star Trek brand, and eventually we'll connect with all the sort of areas, all the elements, all the subgenres of, like sci-fi, and just all the sort of different parts of the general audience, and eventually we'll have some hits and it'll work, because he doesn't get Star Trek, he doesn't get science fiction. He hated Star Trek. He was brought on as the non-Star Trek fan to balance Roberto Orci, who was the Star Trek fan. So he was brought on so the idea was, well, we have a non-Star Trek fan and a Star Trek fan together to write a film that everyone can enjoy, fans and the general audience. And then Orsi left, and Kurtzman took over with no understanding or appreciation of Star Trek, and tried to turn it into a generic science fiction brand by trying to just copy everything and anything, because he has no idea. And that all came out of him believing it was a dead brand, and that this was the only way to use the IP. And that was the problem, because he believed that that's how it went. He didn't get that it actually had, you know, generations of love and longevity that was behind it, that just had to be tapped into. But yeah, so we'll see what happens. We'll see in a few months what happens. I don't think they can put together anything that's going to work without, you know, those elements. But we'll see. I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think of the current situation.